My name is Kunal Patel. I'm co-founder of Fiken Media, a local game studio in Orlando, and co-founder of Indienomicon. It's a local showcase of game developers and the games they're making. So I'm just going to go over things that are happening here in Orlando and kind of like what's been leading to this growth of indie games in the studios here. So, we all have a lot of talents. We work with 3D modeling programs, game engines, a lot of the platforms where you play your games. These are things that are in our wheelhouse. We may look like homeless people sometimes, but we are extremely talented and extremely smart. And it's, all these things that you deal with on a daily basis. Now, there's something special happening here in Orlando, and it's because a lot of us are being really stubborn, and we're all building things that we want to build. And we're doing it here, and we're kind of pushing things along. And you notice that there's even places like Forbes, they're starting to take a look at us, and they're saying, hey, Orlando startups are driving tech as the region's second largest industry. And then Orlando's on the list of promising tech hubs in 2014. And you may not be able to read that, but it says video game development in particular seems to be a big deal in Orlando. Florida's high density of youth and tech support provide the ideal environment for developers to set up shop, which a lot of us did. Then also you'll notice that there's a lot of things here, a lot of building blocks for what makes for good game studios. UCF has a master's game program called 5, which was ranked nationally number 2. Number 1, I think, was USC, and they get millions of dollars from George Lucas and Spielberg, and we don't get that, and we're number 2. And we have, even UCF has like an undergraduate game program that's like expanding. Full Sail University has a lot of notoriety. They've got a game program. The Creative Village is something that's not here yet, but it's a $1 billion infrastructure geared towards game studios, animation studios, creative digital media. So they know on the horizon in the future, we're going to be a big deal. So that's coming together. And then the Melrose Center is in downtown, is the second floor of the library. And I haven't thought about the library like in 10 years. But then this place opened up, and it's like this digital media utopia. They gutted the whole thing, moved the books to other floors, and then you go there. And the thing is, like, that place is better than most professional studios. So that's free to use if you happen to live in Orange County. The other thing is, like, a lot of the stuff that's been happening here has happened in the past couple of years. That right there is a couple logos from the tech ecosystem in June 2010. And then this is from August 2014. Like, look at all those logos, all those different programs that have kind of set up shop to help, the game studios and the tech people around here. And a lot of those logos are game related, so it's kind of exciting times to be here. Let's see if you guys can hear this. This is Bill Clinton when he went on The Daily Show.
Why? Disney World, Universal Theme Park, they need those computer simulators. The Global Entertainment Arts Video Game Division, anybody that's ever been, like me, hooked on a video game, knows that you got to have good simulation to keep yourself in a constant state of anxiety. Right? And, well, wait a minute, and the Defense Department and NASA, and they all put money in there together, and the University of Central Florida has 3,000 students, they feed them in. Why are they doing that? Because when they work together, they're so much more powerful than when they sit around and fight all the time. What's the result? 100 new computer simulation companies. That's what's working in America today.
So Bill Clinton happened to realize that Orlando is a special place, and he told Jon Stewart. Now, that was just a little bit about what is making Orlando special. A lot of really talented people, a lot of talented studios that got together and started doing cool things. And little by little, a lot of you guys are going to find out about it, and then even more people are going to know about it. Hopefully, all of us, we don't end up with full heads of gray hair before we kind of reach that level of notoriety we're all looking for. But I guess you can learn a little bit more about us now that Brandon's going to ask us the hard questions.
Okay, cool. Well, going down the list, The first thing, Hopple Games is going to tell us a little bit about developing an idea, how you develop an idea for a game.
All right. Let's get down to the real reason that we're all here, guys. What would you say if I told you could triple your monthly income from home by selling this revolutionary new berry? No, sorry. Conference room in a hotel, just kind of got the timeshare pyramid scheme vibe going on.
Not with that beard. I don't think.
Yeah, no, no one would buy
a beard
anything.
that big.
Some people actually give me money on the street. All right, so developing ideas is kind of a weird nebulous thing. Like how do you force thoughts into your brain? I want to preface this by saying that as far as game development is concerned, ideas are a relatively small part of the overall picture. Like, sure, they can be important, and big, huge ideas are great and can really affect your game in a positive way, but ideas are not enough to float everything. Execution is by far the most important part of game development. That's why you have great idea in concept things that are just flops and terrible to play and not fun at all. And that's why you have relatively mundane ideas like Call of Duty sells more than, everything. And it's, all right, put some guys in a room, give them guns. It's not the most groundbreaking idea ever. It's really the execution that sells that game. There's a few $1 billion in marketing that probably goes along with it, but they took that idea and they iterated on it until they got something that was really tight and really fun to play and beat out all the other exact same ideas that were in that crop. So with that kind of prefacing the rest of this, there's a few ways you can go about generating ideas for games. One thing that you can do is, probably the most important thing, is to kind of constrain yourself. A lot of people like to think that going indie is great because no one's telling you what to do or what to make, and you can just do whatever you want. Doing whatever you want it's like a double-edged sword. It's got positives and negatives. You don't ever want to think up ideas on a completely blank slate, because your brain just doesn't want to deal with all of the possibilities. There's too many options for you to really focus down and think hard about one thing. So a good thing to do is to give yourself artificial constraints. Say you want to make a game about nature. That immediately rules out millions of ideas that don't in some way involve nature. Pick one kind of broad topic and focus all of your ideas around that. This will help your brain kind of narrow down and get ideas that are easier to form from nothing, because you at least have the crutch of, well, that game's not about nature, so, that's irrelevant right now. Another important thing is that ultimately, coming up with ideas for games is just a numbers game. You should try and write down everything you get, whether you think it's garbage or whether it seems like really cool, the game idea, the next big thing. Just keep writing them all down. Day after day, write down different ideas every day. Don't get set on one game idea that you think is going to be it, and then just quit thinking after that. Keep writing things down. Every few weeks, kind of go through and filter off the ideas that you think are crap, or the ones that could maybe legitimately turn into something. And after enough of that process, a few months go by, you've got a handful of ideas that you think are really good and could really make it. After that point, we go back to the execution phase, where it's you have to try out some of these ideas, try and find flaws in them, try and find things that are special about them and that could be really good. Keep iterating on the ideas that work, scrap the ones that don't, never be afraid to like throw things away entirely. And eventually, you might have something that somebody else wants to play. Ta-da!
All right. Yes, thank you. All right, next we have Chris is going to tell us a little bit about putting together a team, which I find a little unfair because he actually just marries the people he wants to put on his team. So.
that only works sometimes.
That only works sometimes, okay.
Yeah.
Third of the time, every time?
Yeah, like 90% of the time, every time.
I told him no.
So yeah, putting together a good team is there's so many different variables in that one sentence. Finding the people that you can work closest with, I think. Skill sets are developed over time, but dealing with somebody else's personality, whether you got a, maybe you got a jerk on your team that you don't really want to work with or doesn't take direction very well or something like that. But yeah, I mean, skill set is usually something that we look at secondary after a person's personality. Skill set is always important depending on what they're doing. If they're a programmer, obviously they need to know how to, write code in the code that you guys are using, or if they're familiar with the engine you're writing your game in or something like that, then yeah, that's great. But one person can really make or break your team. I've seen a few teams in the area and just bring somebody on and then they're gone in a week. So you have to be careful with who you want to work with. Be very selective, take your time. Make sure when you're hiring somebody that you're asking the right questions. And be very selective, be picky. It's your business, it's your company. If you're going to do something, make sure you do it right. Make sure you want to do it with the people that also have the same vision and goals in mind as you do. Yeah, I haven't really had anybody on my team that I've had problems with, except my wife.
Should have known that.
But other than
He's
that,
the problem.
it's me. I have a bad attitude.
Dating somebody for next week?
Yeah. I'm actually dating somebody right now. Yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, next we got my good friend AJ, who's going to talk a little bit about writing games.
All right. Hold on, my notes are on my phone. I'm super high tech with that stuff. So anyway, as I said before, I'm AJ Johnson. I actually do a couple of things. So I work as a writer for Mommy's Best Games. I also manage 8-Bit Horse, which is a site that has basically detailed articles about other people's games. We do about 50 articles a year, mostly from indie developers, because those tend to be the folks who are making 2D video games, which is what our site focuses on. So I'm going to talk first about Mommy's Best Games and writing, and I'll talk a little bit about writing about games in addition. So at Mommy's Best, basically I provide the script for the game, but I also get to provide a little bit of design input as well. Since I'm friends with the guy that runs the company, I get to play everything in advance when it's way pre-alpha stage and things don't work at all. And it's really nice because as being able to provide design input lets me have input on the game, but I don't have to do any of the hard stuff like actually programming and creating art assets. So when I'm like, hey, that thing would be really cool, you should add that, then I get to go off and do whatever the heck I want. And a week later, the programmer comes back and goes, well, I spent the whole week and now that's in there. And it's like, good, that's great, that's awesome. Right, exactly, I am that guy. But the main thing that I do on the games is writing. So the big thing to know when you're doing writing is that unless you're a one-man studio and you're the one person that decides everything that goes into the game, you're going to be working on a team. And so the writing portion of the game is only a piece of the entire puzzle. So that provides its own unique challenges. If you're making a turn-based RPG or a point-and-click adventure, then chances are those are really heavily story-driven, and you're going to have to suss out the story before you get really hardcore into development. If you're working on just about anything else, the story is really just there to provide context for the experience. So if you're making a run-and-gun action game, you don't want the player stopping every couple of minutes and watching a 5-minute long cutscene. It doesn't matter how great your ideas are, you are taking away from the game at that point. So really the important piece is that whatever you're doing in writing, you at least don't want to detract from the experience. So anything that you're putting into the game that's going to slow down the pace or that's going to take away from the overall experience really needs to get axed out. And hopefully if you're working with a team, they'll tell you what needs to be axed out, but you really need to use your own judgment, because you don't want to come in there with a gigantic script that needs to get sliced down. So most of the stuff I've done is for action games. We did Serious Sam Double D, which is a run and gun action game. The nice thing about that was we were actually able to get the voice actors from, like, the guy that played Serious Sam in the game was the guy in our game. So that helped a lot to add a lot of flavor, but even with that, I tried to keep all the dialogue exchanges to no more than 6 lines of dialogue every time the game stopped. And a lot of that's heavily loaded in the front of the game where it's some tutorializing kind of thing. But otherwise, most of the interruptions only happen between levels. So gameplay is king. If there's a conflict between the writing and the writing is the one that needs to get cut. If you're making the game less fun with your writing, that's a problem. So I realize I'm up here as a writer telling you all the things to not put in a game, but that is really important to understand what your limitations are and understand that things are going to change midstream. So when you start at the beginning of a project, you've got an idea for what the universe is like, and the process, as Nick mentioned about the creative process, is pretty much the same with other forms of media. You sit down, you think about your characters, you think about the overall narrative, the world, all of the kind of things that you would do if you were writing a story or anything else. But that idea from the beginning of the game and what happens at the end of the game may not be the same. So to use an example from Mommy's Best Games, I just had a phone call with Nathan, who's the guy that runs the company. He's the programmer. And he originally planned on having a whole bunch of levels. We're making a game called Pig Eat Ball. 3 words, all singular, Pig Eat Ball. It's about pigs that are eating tennis balls on a space station. It makes no sense, as none of our other games make a lot of sense anyway. And he had a whole idea for these levels that were going to take place in the mines, and there were going to be all these mines underneath the space station that, I don't know, pigs and clam people and all kinds of stuff were going to be digging through the mines. And he called me up a couple of weeks ago and said, we decided we're not going to have the mines. They're still going to be in the game, but there aren't going to actually be any levels in there. We're replacing them with sushi. So there's going to be a whole lot of sushi levels. So now we need some dialogue around what are you going to have people say when they're in a level filled with sushi. So so you do need to change on the fly, and you do need to scrap things as you go. And then another question is, how much story do you need in your game? So again, in an action game, you tend to need less. And it really depends on what you want the experience to be. So you take a game like Limbo that has a lot of story. There's a lot being said there, and there is no dialogue in that game. There are no words, nobody stops and says anything, but you still, by the end of the game, you have an experience, you have gone through a narrative process. So I'm not saying, man, there should be no writing in any games, but Limbo is an example of a game told basically without overt narrative. The flip side of that is that narrative can help you take a lot of shortcuts and add context and atmosphere to a game without going through that extra process. So Limbo there's a multi-year development cycle, so most indie games are going to happen in a much less time than that, in a much smaller scale. Excuse me, my brain went crazy for a second. So that is a finely crafted experience, and so the developers had to think about how to tell a story without using words. But you can also tell a fantastic story with words. That's how we traditionally have done things. So you can describe things in text, like there's a grand vista that you're overlooking. You can describe the clouds and the fluffy little birds and all that kind of stuff. Or, a Lovecraftian tale where the Shoggoth is taking over your brain and you're getting all demented and whatnot. That's a good way to use storytelling, to just flat out tell the player what's going on, and you don't have to go through the extra steps of designing gameplay and art assets to support that story. You can just flat out tell the player and add things to the game that literally don't exist in the game just by putting them in words. So I'm going to flip over real quick and just talk about writing about games. So from the context of 8-Bit Horse. So we write about only 2D video games, which means we mainly deal with indie developers. There's only a handful of game companies out there, WayForward and Ubisoft and a couple others that actually make 2D. Everything else is coming from indie studios. So I'm just going to tell you a couple things from my experience. Remi is going to go into some more detail about marketing your game, but I'm going to tell you some of the things that seem like everybody should understand and that a lot of folks don't seem to. So if you are a game developer, here are a few things that you need to have. One is a website. That seems obvious, but I can tell you from my experience that there are developers out there that have no website whatsoever. They have maybe a Facebook page or a Twitter. You have to have a Twitter as well, but they have nothing. And a few other things. So you need screenshots, you need a logo for your game. Even if it's not the final logo, you at least need something so that when somebody wants to write about your game, they can stick the logo for your game right there in the middle of the article or at the front of the YouTube video or the thumbnail on the YouTube video so people can see that name because you want your name out there as much as possible. Ideally, you will have gameplay video, actual gameplay, not a 1.5-minute long cutscene that doesn't tell anybody what's going on in your game. And most importantly, if you have decided on a release date, which they usually slip, right? You decide, okay, it's gonna be out in Q4 2014, and then that rolls around and you're like, well, Q1 2015. You need to keep that up to date on your site. There are loads and loads and loads of developers who I can go on their websites right now, and apparently their game came out in 2013. Nobody knows that because they can't buy them because the developers are still working on it. Yeah. So if you want people to know that your game is upcoming, it's on the way, and it's coming out 3 months from now, 6 months from now, or a year, or we haven't decided. TBD is fine for a release date when you're a year off from the mark. But you need to have that in. There's several good tools out there. Vlambeer has a couple of good tools that they've developed. So there's the press kit. It's press kit function. If you're a programmer, it's like press kit, parentheses, and parentheses. It's a function, I don't know, I'm not a programmer. But the press kit is basically a template, and the template has a place to put your logo, your screenshot, a video, an email address. That's something else you need to have. You need to have a way for press to contact you, because, hey, I want to write about your game, I want to make a Let's Play video, I want anything, I want to know when your game's coming out, I want more information. You have to have an email address out there for those people to pick that up. So Vlambeer has, like I said, the press kit function that has all of you just fill in the blanks with all your own stuff. And they just recently, I think it's not even official, they have a thing called distribute, also parentheses and parentheses, which is a way to validate press that are looking for copies of games, because there are people who will just send you an email and go, hey, I work for Joe's game site, I want your game for free because I don't want to pay for it, thank you. And they get a Steam key from you and they go off and you never hear from them. And if you've got a limited number of Steam keys to give out, you want to make sure you're giving them to people who are going to write an article about your game. So Distribute allows game sites to go on and register an email address or register a domain name where there might have a couple of dozen people that have an email address that ends in joesgames.com or whatever. So you can verify those people in advance. So that's what I have to say about game writing, and Remi's going to give a little more detail on guerrilla marketing, or maybe Brandon will tell you.
No, that's perfect.
I'm going to segue for Brandon.
No, this is great.
It's that nice voice you have. Just lead into it.
Mm-hmm.
So hi, as AJ said, my name's Remi. We recently just released our first game for a studio called Temple Tap, and the reason I'm bringing this up is all goes in conjunction with marketing. So Temple Tap is our studio's first game, which is a game that we developed to be for the mobile market. We made to be a pickup type of game that anybody can play, and it's very simple, very colorful, very bright, so on and so on. The reason I'm bringing all this up is because probably everybody in this room has not heard of Temple Tap, or people who know me personally, or people who have seen me before. There's reasons behind that. That's going to change very soon. With marketing, you have to go ahead and tailor to the audience. Now, this kind of goes back to what everybody was saying. First off, it depends on the type of game that you're making, the platform where you're releasing, the age group, the demographic, so on and so on and so on. To make this just easier to discuss, I'm just going to kind of use the example of a mobile game. So for mobile games, it's very much the type of market people who play these type of games are pick up, put down type people. You can't have a very story-driven game like AJ was describing with intense writing, or like a Call of Duty style game or anything like that, because it's not the type of audience that you're building to. So before your game's even out, you have to understand what your audience is in order to market towards those type of people. So in our case, Temple Tap was a game that's meant to be played by anyone who owns a phone. It's made to be played by grandmas, by the casual market, by even a hardcore market, whatever. It's very much like an Angry Birds. So with all that in mind, I had to kind of think, well, how can we advertise a game such as this and people can easily identify it? So it comes down to how a lot of your people do it. And usually there's two simple ways you market. You either have a buttload of money, or you have to go ahead and find the people that can make it go viral. Now, I bring up the viral aspect because that's something that you might have heard the term, you might have seen it happen, but I'll use the example that everybody's probably heard of. Everybody in this room probably has heard of Flappy Birds, correct? Flappy Birds was made by a guy for 1.5 years prior to the game ever getting famous. That game went viral overnight by one person. A lot of people don't know that, but there's one person who had a YouTube channel that had over, it was like 3.5 million viewers that were both in the European market and the American market. And immediately, because this guy joked around and played the game, it went viral and the guy literally overnight became a millionaire. Fantastic for him. That's not usually the norm. However, it's what I'm trying to point out. In order for games to get a little bit more notice, you have to get the right people involved. So before your game's even released, you have to start reaching out to these people. So what's the easiest way to do this? Well, there are websites out there that you can go ahead and check out, and they'll give you a giant list of people that review games. But as AJ said, sometimes you'll get a guy who has a YouTube channel with 20 people. They're involved, and they're on that list. And then you might have the other guy, like Pootie Pie, that I was trying to explain, who has 3.5 million people who won't even look at you because you're not offering him incentive to look at you. So you have to go ahead and make your game marketable in the sense that it's visually stimulating and you're offering something for free if they look at it, or you give them an enticing reason to look at your product. So what I did for Temple Tap is that, we don't really have a screenshot of it, but Temple Tap is a very, very, very brightly colored game. It's very pretty, and everybody always comments about the art, usually 9 times out of 10. We did a little bit of a tactic in the beginning where I looked for people in the media who I knew would look at this type of game. So I went after Kotaku, I went after Touch Arcade, I went after 148 Apps, I went after all the Let's Play people on YouTube. And I spent a good 4 months solid. I'm talking like around 8-hour days, just at nighttime after I'm doing all the work for just the dev studio, going nonstop and emailing every one of these people and trying to tailor an email that would be at least not sounding like it's wash and repeat, copy and paste. After a while, when you do it for like week 2 or 3, it starts becoming copy and paste, but I digress, that's just the way it is. But after a while, you'll have these people get back in touch with you and they'll say, hey, this looks pretty good. What should I do next? So as AJ said, you have to have a lot of things up front for people to take notice. For one, a website, priority. 2, you have to have a trailer, and it can't just be a cutscene. It has to be something that explains what your game is. 3, you have to have a reason for people to play your game. Just because you tell them it's a great game doesn't mean it's a great game. You may think that, but it may not always be true. And the people who review online will say that flat out. And it's just something we have to accept. So you have to kind of give them a reason to play these type of games. So usually what you do is you offer them free copies of the game. That doesn't always work either, because a lot of people think, okay, well, I already have somebody who worked on, I don't know, let's say Limbo, for example, offering me to play their game. Why should I play your game? You have to go ahead and look at your audience and kind of figure out what's the best way to go about it. So for us, we offered to give them free artwork, which my 2D artist hated me for doing this because he had to give out hundreds of drawings for free. But by doing that, we had a lot of people who were who normally would have to pay for it to have these reviews look at our games. An example, right now I'm talking with Kotaku, and they're going to be doing an article hopefully sometime by December. Cross my fingers that person's telling the truth. I have another person from Touch Arcade who got back to me who thought that I was just some scrub developer in Orlando, and then he found out that I actually have been developing for years and I actually had a quality game. So he actually got back and said he wanted to look at it. But that took months of me going through backdoor channels. So there's lots of different ways to go about this, but the top 3 I will tell you you can do it are these. LinkedIn, believe it or not, is a great way to find people. A lot of people think LinkedIn is like the Facebook for the business world, and it kind of is. What people don't realize is journalists, often who review games, will post that they work for a company even though they're freelancers or working for companies. Those are the people who write articles for you versus the people who work for the company, because they get paid for enticing articles. You have to find people like that to go ahead and write reviews for your games. So you're basically incenting them to review a game that's upcoming, that looks new and original, that other people haven't heard of yet. They make your game go viral. If they're the person who wrote that article, they get a big paycheck. So you have to look for people like that, and you have to keep in mind the type of people that write these articles. There's a lot of research that gets involved, and I won't get into it because it's, again, months of this crap. However, the other thing that I recommend is Twitter. And Twitter is something I was joking about earlier that I, to this day, still don't understand how Twitter works correctly until like maybe like the last 2 or 3 weeks. But,
No one does.
Yeah, no one does.
Twitter's a mystery.
Twitter's a mystery, but buzzwords, catchphrases, and the hashtags and all that, whatever you want to call it, this is a great way to market your game, even though you don't think you're marketing your game. An example, my friend Fabian here told me to tweet to PopCap Games, because we have a game that's very much a PopCap game style game. I just figured, why am I going to write fan mail to our developer? That's stupid. What I didn't know was that if I were to write at PopCap Games, my new game is out. Here's a trailer. Everyone who follows PopCap Games sees that in their feed. Now I have indirectly over 1 million viewers that look at my game because they think I am part of PopCap because it's the same quality bar, even though I'm a totally third party, because I wrote on their hashtag tags. This is something that I just learned about weeks ago, and that's how I began a lot of people to now look at Temple Tap and look at reviews. So Twitter is a great way to find people. Mainly, you could do a search and just type in Kotaku journalists. And like I said, same way like LinkedIn, people will list. But for whatever reason, unlike LinkedIn, they are way more open to leaving their private emails out in the open. So if you are a good writer, it's always good to have somebody who has very good writing skills to write to these people, to get in touch with them, and give them incentive to look at your game. And again, this is all done with no money. Now, normally a AAA title studio, they have millions of dollars in marketing alone. That's the reason why you can't go to the bathroom, close your eyes, turn on your phone, turn on TV, or go see a movie without seeing World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, or something along those lines, or even take the bus without seeing an advertisement because they have that type of money. Any developers, we rely on word of mouth, and we rely on the golden opportunity that's the viral market. That's not always the norm for most of us, but we have to ride on the bandwagon in different ways. So through Twitter, through LinkedIn, and through the underground game communities, you can go really viral really quick. Another great example would be Neograph. Neograph is a forum website that's been around for years. There's just a whole bunch of people that just talk about games. No big deal. These are the same people that cracked like the Sonic XL game, for example, that was a game that was developed almost 20 years ago that never saw a light of day. Someone released it for free on there. These are the same people that made Limbo become a top seller because somebody on there talked highly of it and it went viral. You have to tailor to your audience and you have to try to find the right networks to go ahead and work into. My biggest thing I can say in that regard is do not do it all at once. Because if you're doing it all at once, people would think that you're almost like a machine, like a bot. That you're automating, going to all these websites, copy and pasting the same message. You have to do this over time. So before your game is out by almost a year, I would recommend start advertising. Get some artwork, toss a screenshot. Screenshot Saturdays on Twitter, toss it. You build an audience, that's how you get your marketing, and that's how you get people who take an interest in your studio. Other than that, act of God, really. So that's pretty much my whole spill on it.
All right, Fabian's going to tell us a little bit about things like Steam and Xbox Live and all that good stuff.
We just recently had a game in July. Our game was greenlit for 3 Dead Zed. How do you get a game greenlit? I wouldn't be able to tell you. Our strategy was basically to just wait out for everyone else in the world to get greenlit, and then eventually we get through. So it worked. We're doing the same strategy right now for our other game, Rise of the Ravager. I think one of the things for getting your game greenlit on Steam though is making sure that you have like really good trailers and really good screenshots, like everyone's been mentioning here, because you're talking about people who are about to vote. That, they're looking at hundreds and hundreds of games coming through, so you basically have to grab them in about 15 seconds. And if you haven't done that, then they're probably going to leave. I think. In our case, at least with 3 Dead Zed, I think people are just kind of oversaturated with zombies, so it made it a little bit more difficult for us, even though we're trying to go at different angles and playing them. But it had enough people voting on it where we're still it was greenlit in a relatively happy time for us, at least. Our other game though, it does look very much like it looks like a tablet game, so I think that's why people don't greenlight it. It hasn't been greenlit, so we're actually just bypassing that, we're just going to go ahead and release it on tablet. So anyway, but Steam's really been, it's really interesting to be on there. It's really cool to see all the stats, to see people actually, playing and buying your game and reviewing your game. It's got it has all the tools right there for like really setting up a community. So it's really nice to interact with people, good and bad. Ideally we like the good, good reviewers and good people who are commenting. But it's really cool to just get that immediate response back for anyone who's on Steam. So it's one of the things that we worked a long time to get onto, and we're just really ecstatic that we finally have a game that's on Steam right now. We're also on we were on the Xbox Indie channel, and that was kind of a neat little experience too, just as a whole, because our development team, we've never done any official gaming, any gaming before this. We never worked for another studio. We never had any formal training except for one person or programmer. So we were doing a lot of really learning, like by fire. It's like, okay. And one of the things that was neat about the indie channels, it was a nice entryway into a console to kind of at least get familiar about what is going on with getting your game certified. Now, we're not going through Microsoft Xbox Arcade. We went through the indie channel, which is a difference. It's run by the community of peers, other developers. And we're going in there, we're thinking that, we got this, we got to polish on this game. We know what we're doing and put it out there. And immediately someone crashed it for, I think is kind of a silly reason, is if you pull a memory card out while the game is loading, the game would crash. And I'm like, who does that? I'm like, why are you doing that? Don't do that. But yeah, and especially memory card, but USB cards, anything like that, that's a criteria, and people would do that and pull it, and all of a sudden they're like, game has failed. You're not getting on Xbox. And I remember, you had to wait for other developers to come by and review your game, and we were initially going to release on, if I remember right, last year on Xbox on Holiday, and we were just really excited. We're like, we're going to have this game on there, and all of a sudden we failed, and we're like, well, that's not going to happen because you have to wait another 7 days before you can submit your game again. And so me, foolishly, I already sent out press kits and everything like that, like, hey, your game's coming out. And then it got canceled. Like, oh no. So we released a zombie game for Thanksgiving. So that doesn't really. It's like, hey.
They love to eat.
Yeah, sure. Actually, when we sent out cards, we had like zombies like attacking turkeys and stuff like that. We're like, what can we do to like mix up this bad timing and everything? But what was neat though is just in general is like, hey, you're speaking to other indie developers, which you got great feedback on, because if you take your game out to play it with a friend or anything like that, they're almost always too nice. They're always like, yeah, that's good. I like this game. Other developers seem to be a lot more brutal, but in a good way, because what I mean by brutal is they're telling you, well, this isn't fun, this doesn't work, and I suggest going this route. And when you mix in that the internet with other developers who have no idea who you are, they have no problem telling you, hey, here's some things you need to do. So while you're also trying to get certified, you're also getting this immediate feedback about which, hey, I think this might be good for your game here and there, to maybe you should fix that or work on that. So, and there's a whole play test area. So it was a neat experience. Unfortunately, Microsoft didn't continue with the XNA development tools, so it pretty much died. They pretty much abandoned the channel, so the channel became just kind of like, just really difficult to find any like good quality game. So it's just kind of this. It was a neat experience to at least go out there and kind of like see what it's like on the initial consoles. We haven't done any development yet for PS4 or Xbox One, but curious to see what that would be like. So eventually we need to switch over to tools, obviously, because we developed in XNA and that's dead, so now we need to get something else here. But so those two experiences are kind of where, I know it was, Brandon was asking us about, Steam and Xbox, or being on console, so that's kind of what we've gone through as a general statement. So.
Good, thank you. Now, one of the cooler developments that we've seen over the past few years, really past year,
Since May.
Since May, so not even a year. has been the development of something locally called IndieBox, which is a great company. So I thought Liv could tell us a little bit about what IndieBox is and what they're doing for the indie game community.
So what I'm about to talk about is going to be completely different from what everything else down there happened. We are at a pinball and arcade convention, and so I'm assuming that everyone here understands nostalgia and knows the value of it, and trying to bring back that kind of thing. And as you've noticed, I try to get everyone in here that I can. So I'm really sorry if I've been distracting you the whole time. I've been bothering every person that walks past this door, hey, we're talking about things. But I'm with IndieBox and sort of the short version of what we do, and I see a lot of faces in this crowd that I have pitched to and annoyed over the past 3 days. And I have been talking for 72 straight hours, so if you'll forgive the fact that I sound a little bit hoarse and occasionally my brain just stops being able to words. But we take what would otherwise be an exclusively digital product and we make it physical. And the value of that is, when I was a kid, whenever I went to go get a PC game, my brother always had consoles and I always had PC games. And we would drive down to the local Toys R Us and I would pick up the box off the shelf and I'd have to wait all the way through the line, all the way until we got out to the car in order to rip it open. And inside there was always a manual and a CD and a map and stuff that I was able to read and stuff I was able to look at. And when I came in to interview for IndieBox, and even when I applied, I didn't completely get. There wasn't the leap to we're actually making a physical box for something that otherwise would never be able to physically interact with. And so I had one of my game cartridges with me, but I dropped it on the way over here. But when they opened it up and showed me the USB that was inside and says, hey, there's 3 copies of the game on here. It's gonna work on whatever computer you plug it into. And when you buy this box, it's DRM free. So you're not licensing this from anybody. You own this whole box and everything inside of it. I went, that's the freaking coolest thing I have heard lately. And then they hired me, so I don't know what to say about that. But in terms of marketing this and seeing what we're doing, I come from a weird background. I completed 2 museum internships, one for a maritime museum and the other for a science museum. And I'm also a social media community manager, and I'm working for a gaming industry company. And so when it comes to selling these and talking about this, it's very difficult than the challenges that indie developers face. We could choose to spend all of our time talking specifically about the nostalgia value, which is huge. We're sitting in an entire convention that is all about keeping that memory alive and building new things and creating different things of things that are based off of things from our childhood. Or we could go straight to marketing directly to indie developers or fans of indie developers and saying, hey, we're making a way for you to buy this product physically. Or the third route, which is we have a lot of collectors who just want to collect the limited edition stuff that's inside of our boxes. And it's a combination of all 3 of those things. It's incorporating the digital and the physical and the emotional. We have the best community of any company in the whole world. They call themselves the IndieBox family. And I think there's a couple of you in the room who I've welcomed to the IndieBox family over the last 3 days, and thank you very much and welcome again. And we work really, really hard to make sure that everything we're doing is bridging that gap. A lot of us are very guilty of buying the Humble Bundle and then letting it sit in our Steam libraries. You should see what mine looks like. It's terrible and unorganized and awful, and I haven't played an 1/8 of what I own. So when you get this game in the mail though, that's not going to sit in your Steam library. The Steam key is there. You can activate it, but you're going to actually play this game, and it's going to be something that you enjoy. And those things that are inside of this box are going to sit between you and the screen. In my head, this is how I imagine my customers. They're sitting there and behind their screen, and in front of them are all the little things from Brutal Legend, like the leather scented air freshener. They've got on their backstage pass lanyard, so like what we have here, and they're playing the heck out of the game. And it creates an entire environment in which they're very excited to be playing this, and it's the feeling that you used to get when you were a kid. When I got this thing and I'm so excited about it. that you don't get when you click purchase on Steam. It's a, you know, I'm not writing on anything else over here. That's not what's happening at all. But it's different. It's a third dimension to what would normally be something that, you know, you would just click once and you would purchase. And like I said, that nostalgia value, it's really here and it's all around us right now. And it's something that we feel really, really passionate about.